All right. Well, everyone, thank you to our 8th and final episode review of the Dopesick panel. I'm glad everybody is able to join us. With us, I'd like to start introducing some of the individuals that we have with us. And before I do, I just want to, tell everyone thank you for, going on this journey with us, watching all of these shows, all of these episodes. It's been definitely a roller coaster of emotions. So joining us, we have Lisa Pasquarosa. Lisa is the head of sales for a publishing firm in the gaming industry and a busy working mom. But since the death of her beloved son, Justin, who passed away at the age of 27 from an overdose, she has become a tireless advocate for addiction support in ways addicts and family members can understand the core problems that they face and get the help that they need. Thank you for joining us, Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
Also joining us is Ben Levinson. Ben is the chairman of the Levenson Foundation, a nonprofit foundation committed to improving the quality and availability of mental health, harm reduction, and related supports for people who use drugs and their families. Focused on drug reform and policy of the overdose crisis domestically, Ben advocates TLF's mission with the expertise and diverse relationships across federal, state government, public and private behavioral health, harm reduction, SUD, substance use disorder treatment, and commercial health plans. Ben, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much, Kay.
Okay. Then we also have Mr. Karl Brummer. Karl is a master level therapist working in Nashville, Tennessee, and he's been working in treatment for over 15 years and has personal recovery for 17. It is probably one of my greatest honors to introduce Mr. Karl Bremer.
What up? I'm in the house. Do it.
All right.
Mr. Hip.
So, everybody,
me and Jason don't get intros no more.
No, you and Jason don't get intros anymore. All right. We'll do it since this is the last one for Dopesick, but this isn't our last one that we're doing. The often duplicated but never imitated Mr. Joseph Guerrero, who's been working in treatment for a while. But not only that, but he has one of the greatest and most awesome recovery stories about recovery. And actually, recovery in Mexico is probably one of my favorite stories from Joseph. Thank you, Joseph.
It's a good one.
And
Thank you for having me, Kay. I appreciate it.
And then we have Mr. Jason Cabello. Jason is living in Texas right now, but he hails from South Florida. Jason has a really personal connection to addiction and recovery. But not only that, but he's used this experience in addiction and recovery he's used the experience in addiction to help empower those who are going through the same things that he went through. Jason, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So I'm not gonna lie, guys. I was really sad when Betsy died last episode, but I didn't cry. I cried on this episode. And I cried because 2 times actually. The first time when it just came on and they were doing the 400,000 dead. And, I could just literally count the individuals that I know that have overdosed and died and the individuals in my family. And then I thought about the individuals that we've had on the show who've lost people and just the enormous loss that we all have felt related to this. And so yeah, I cried. Did anybody else tear up? Anybody else willing to admit that they were a little emotional?
You know what got me was that courtroom scene when the mom walked up to the table with the urn and ashes of her son.
With the ashes.
I just was waiting for it to like splash these dudes
Yes.
with the ashes. I was just like, she's gonna do it. And I was all teary. I was like, do it.
Well, so I cried when they did the thing at the museum, right? Yeah. And you're seeing all these people and you're already feeling some emotion, and they zoomed in on Betsy's mom and you realize that she's there, and even though her daughter has passed and isn't suffering anymore, right? Like her life is still consumed with what they did. right? And that was really, that got me for sure.
You know, the human toll. You know, when you think about just how many people have died, right? And you think about the lives that have been, the families destroyed, the lives torn apart, and you know, we search for answers, and I think Michael Keaton's character did a really good job at the end, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But you know, all of the pain and all of the loss doesn't have to be for naught, right? And you know, I'm gonna start out with Lisa, and I'm gonna pose a question to Lisa. You know, as we talked about in the introduction, Lisa lost a son to addiction. You know, Lisa, how has the loss of your son empowered you, and how are you using that?
So first of all, you know, you don't ever stop thinking about the loved one that you've lost. And from, you know, everything that I've learned about, you know, addiction and recovery, after Justin passed away, it just made me a stronger person to want to help others and to want to share my knowledge and to do something good from everything that I've learned. You know, there's not a day that goes by where I'm not trying to think of a way that I can, you know, do something and do better. And maybe some of the things that I should have been doing with Justin, I'm trying to do for other people now. And using any type of information that I have. I mean, there's not, like I said, there's not a day that a minute that goes by where, you know, I don't think about Justin, and, you know, just, I wish I could have done more to help him. And that's kind of how I've been living now, is just trying to help other people, paying it forward, doing whatever I can.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. Well, Ben, you know, you shared with us, you know, your loss a couple episodes ago. Tell me how that's empowered you.
Wow. So yeah, I lost my brother Rich to the earliest formulation of OxyContin, the same week the towers came down in 2001, and I found him in his house, and I lived like, you know, whatever, 45 seconds away, and I went through all of these, you know, I mean, I think it was active in my use. It wasn't really off the chain at all, but you know, I mean, it was devastating, and I was, you know, it's like I'm 45 seconds away. Like, how did I not stop this? You know, and you know, Rich's death did inspire. I mean, he had been to treatment, and I was embarking on a journey that would involve a lot of treatment. And you know, I think that is part of what inspired me to really work on advancing systems of care and clinical architectures, and and so I do think that's you know, I've kind of converted on that, and continue, you know, even probably with increasing intensity, to be brutal on systems and compassionate on people, and I think our systems, you know, are out of step with the reality of drugs and drug users and drug use in America. And so, you know, like, so how that's showing up in my life today is just continuing, you know, to show up, and help innovate on, you know, on systems, and just do my part. So thanks for asking about him.
Yeah. And you know, so, you know, we've had, and we've all experienced, you know, I don't know anyone who can say that they don't know someone who's lost someone or hasn't lost someone that they personally knew to addiction. Karl, have you ever met anyone that hasn't had that sort of connection or loss?
You know, I run in circles of recovery people, most of my time. And it's consistent. It's a friend, it's a sibling, it's a family member, it's the neighbor, it's my neighbor across the street, their teenage kid. There's, again, the circle that I run in, people are deeply impacted. But again, I keep thinking that even outside of that circle, when we go to dinner with normies, right? And normies, and the topic comes up, Karl, what do you do for work? I'm a therapist. I help alcoholics and addicts. And every family member's got someone attached to addiction somewhere, whether it's process, chemical, eating. There's, again, addiction is a human thing.
And what do you say to them? What's your response to them when they open up to you about, you know, what's been going on or what happened or someone that they've lost?
First, I start with my rate. My hourly rate as a therapist, and I'm taking clients. Then I transition to there's hope, because I mean the whole reason that I do what I do is like there's hope. And again, families, I think, get left out in the dark too much, where they throw the addict in treatment and it's like, but the whole family needs help. Everybody is attached to this. And the more that we can treat everybody, I have so much respect for Lisa being here tonight. Of like, she's lost her child, Ben lost her brother. Like, I've lost so many friends and clients. But I keep coming back to like, what do you do for recovery to help the people that you love that are struggling with it? It's like, well, it's not my problem. Yes, it is. Like, and that's, I really advocate for the family component of like everybody in the family that's attached to them is now in recovery. That's my flag that I fly, baby.
And then, and Joseph, you know, tell us, you know, tell me, because I know that you run in somewhat of a similar circle as Karl, but your circle, I think is slightly different. It's from an age range standpoint. I mean, you and Karl about 2 years apart in age.
Well, we're 3 years apart in recovery age.
Okay.
You know, so it is interesting, right? Because like in my professional life and in like my direct personal relationships, it's almost all people who used to live on the streets and shoot dope and do all kinds of crazy stuff, right? And we have like our kind of gallows humor where like we joke about things that normies, right, find horrifying, but it's through that shared, you know, like the big book says, right, that shared experience of escaping like the Titanic, right? But as a parent and my wife not being in recovery, you know, we have a separate circle of friends, you know, the parents from school and the teachers and the other baseball parents who get to know us and, you know, initially don't know what I do for a living. And sometimes when they ask if I don't really want to get into the conversation because of the setting, I'll just say, I'm a healthcare executive. And they're just like, okay, that sounds boring. They don't ask anymore. But when it does come up and it's appropriate to tell them like, yeah, you know, like I'm a counselor, I work in alcohol and drug rehabs. You know, almost always, you know, you see that glimmer of recognition in their eyes, right? Where they either figure out like, oh, I bet you're in recovery, or they're thinking of that loved one. And it's almost without fail, right? You know, we were over at the Neighbors for dinner the other day and it came up and immediately it's like, well, my nephew in California, he's been to 3 rehabs and we don't know what to do with him. And it's like, okay, I can help. But I share the hope, right? Because I'll tell them like, you know, I had a drug problem, and the morbid curiosity, they're like, oh, what was your thing? Right. And I tell them intravenous heroin. You know, they're not expecting that. You see that shock. And then I tell them like, yeah, like I was the guy begging for money at the gas station. I was the guy snatching purses. I was the guy sleeping in his car at the Walmart, nodding off at the restaurant. Like, that was me. And, you know, I think that shocking contrast from that reality to like Stepford suburbs, Cedar Park, Texas, you know, baseball game on a Tuesday night, you know, first helps them know that addiction isn't just that person on the street, right? but also to see that like there's a life after addiction, right? That you can recover and have like this beautiful, fulfilling thing. Because that's the best way I know to give them hope, right? And then we just start talking about whatever their specific.
Yeah, it's like telling somebody that you're on medicine, and immediately they're like, "I got this goiter. I got this thing on my foot. Can you look at it?" You know, they immediately become enthralled with recovery because somebody that they know is struggling or has been struggling, and it's like, how did you get out of it? Like, what did you do? Like, did you have to pay? Did you have to pay penance to the devil? Like, no, like there are ways getting out of it that, and I'm glad that the show approaches that in a very thoughtful and meaningful way. But that's a really good point.
The other thing is, if you're in a social setting and they're drinking, right? Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned like, I'm in recovery, I've been sober 13 years, and they're like, oh, they meet like, is this okay? Like that I have this vodka, or or they'll say, I don't drink like this all the time. Like, don't start.
It's like going to someone's house and they're like, oh, my house is usually never this dirty. Yes, it is. The house is always this dirty. You always drink that much. It's okay. So Jason, you have a very unique story, with recovery. How has the loss of the individuals that actually, I'm going to bring it in a little bit further down the funnel. How did Justin's death, affect how you approach recovery?
Justin's death, it hit me, pretty hard because it was at that point I had already been working in treatment for a couple of years and been clean for a few years. So I had lost, dozens of people that I know. But with Justin, it was just really hard because, we went through detox together. We were roommates in our halfway house together. And then we had some personal stuff that, we worked through. And, towards the end, he would reach out to me, when he'd been drinking and want to talk. And, I'd be like, Justin, I really don't like hearing you like this, and it was just one of those things where the whole group of friends just knew that, if he didn't get help, what was going to happen. So, when something like that happens, when you just pray that it's not going to be that one friend and that he just gets it because, he's worth so much. And then you get, I was at work and then Cliff, who was his therapist, came in and asked, if he could talk to me for a couple minutes. And, then he told me. And then, I immediately, I was devastated. And then I had to break the news to my girlfriend, who was, equally, if not more close with Justin. And then I had to tell her. And then it was just like, I'll never forget that day. And, it's that's one of the reasons, because I talk to a lot of people in early recovery, sometimes in sponsorship through 12 steps, sometimes just at meetings, sometimes people who just reach out to me because they know I'm in recovery. And it's just like, I just can't give up, you just can't give up on somebody, because I had OD'd one time in Trenton, New Jersey. And I got Narcaned and somebody didn't give up on me and Narcaned me an extra 2-3 times from what I understand. And, that could have easily been me too. So, and then, I got clean, and nobody, even my sponsor who was on a couple weeks ago and my mom, their biggest hope for me at one point in my life was that I was going to go to prison. So they knew where I was going to be. And they knew that I was going to be somewhat safe. So yeah, it's just really important to just, you never know when somebody's going to get it. You never know, even that one person who you're just like, I have a sponsee who just, probably 10 times in the past couple of years, just, relapses and goes back to treatment, and then he'll call me and say like, I'm really sorry, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm just happy that you called, so what can we do?
Yeah. Well, I can't, we're going to get to a part of the show where we talk about the end, and I can't wait to talk about the bus. But there is that, right? There's that great unifier between all of us, the individuals in the comment section. And thank you guys for all chiming in, and then us and all of the other guests that we've had. And it's a club that nobody really wants to be a part of, right? But it's still a club that means something, right? It means that we can be there for each other. It means that we can support each other. It means that we're not wallowing in each other's story and pity, but we're using our opportunity of these stories to lift each other up and pick those others up who don't know that they can be pulled out of the situation that they're in. So thank you guys. And I appreciate you all sharing that, because it's hard. None of this is easy to do, guys. We didn't say, hey, this is the easiest thing we're going to do is we're going to go online. We're going to talk about drug addiction and drug abuse and substance abuse disorders. And we're going to watch the show, and it's going to be incredibly depressive, and we're going to try to make the best out of it. No, we saw an opportunity to take something that needed to be talked about, that needed to be addressed, that needed to be brought forth. And we did it because it's a necessity. It's a necessity for everyone to sort of stop hiding these things behind these walls of emotions and feelings and sadness and angst and hurt and guilt and pressure, and let everyone know that it's completely okay to be how you are. It's okay to be how you are. If you're sad about it, if you're angry about it, if you're pissed about it, or if you're confused about it, it's okay. That's why we're here. That's why we have our guest panel. So, and that's another thing, is that we all have these things in common, much in the way that Dr. Phoenix was he was calling around, right? Hey, why aren't there more methadone facilities, right? I want to talk about that. He's like, hey, methadone's working for me, or Suboxone is working for me, and I'm trying to find another one that's closer. And the lady on the phone responds to him, hey, nobody wants a recovery center in their backyard. Then you've been in the industry for a little while. I think I've been a part, or I've helped build around 26 or 27 facilities, actually. Yeah. And it's at every town hall that I've went to let someone know that we're going to be building a treatment center or converting something into a treatment center, I've been met with resistance. Why is that, Ben?
Well, we criminalize anything we want to stigmatize. Okay. And so fundamentally, we have completely stigmatized people who use drugs. And this is a cascade, this NIMBY, not in my backyard stuff. I've fought it for years in my work. Is a cascade from the prohibition and drug war BS that fosters hatred for people who use drugs or who formerly used drugs. And so it's like, if I'm scared, I've been at a town kind of planning and zoning commission meeting that was full of town people, right? And I was seeking zoning approval for a treatment program, and literally had people in the public stand up and say, look, we have a house right behind this place, and we're worried their patients are going to leave and climb through our kids' windows and eat their faces. Like literally, believing that, or at least wanting to transmit that. So, I think even people who no longer use drugs, I think that people in recovery will never really be free of stigma until the people who actively use drugs are also free of stigma. So those are the thoughts that occur to me, Kay.
Karl, Karl, you've worked in addiction for a while, and what's been your experience with, well, I'll say this. So Recovery Unplugged has a facility in Brentwood, Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Brentwood, Tennessee, for those of you that don't know, is a very, very nice and upscale suburb of Nashville. And if you were to drive through any parts of Nashville, and you would, the last place that you would expect to see Recovery Unplugged would be in Brentwood, Tennessee. And what's your experience with that?
It's been very good. I have worked in treatment centers of prisons to homeless people and doing IOP. I've worked with a whole summer teenage kids, longest summer of my life. I've worked with the very affluent, including Brentwood, Tennessee. And here's what I find is people are people are people. And that's what I love about this profession, this industry is even the Brentwood well-to-dos have welcomed us and said, look, you're trying to help people. And yes, there is a stigma, absolutely. But we do our best to, when we set off the fire alarm because people are vaping in group, like we bring cookies to the firehouse, like our bad again, right? We really try and be a good neighbor, but we're very proactive with that because they know we're trying to help people. And that's what I think makes, that's what I love about being part of the human race. I think addicts get it and the families attached to them get it. Like we love differently. But at the end of the day, man, we're all still people. And that's what I love about this industry. I get to work in the treatment industry, and I find the people who work in it are amazing and they get it. And the clients coming in want to be part of it. That's what makes this industry keep growing is more people are getting solution and more people are working in this industry, which opens more doors for people to get help. So that's why I'm on that train.
Lisa, your son, he came to Recovery Unplugged. But he tried did he try other treatment programs before Recovery Unplugged?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing is when we were first putting him into treatment and looking for places, there are not a lot of treatment centers, in New Hampshire, certain parts of Massachusetts. It was very hard to find him a spot somewhere that would take him. So we ended up sending him to California. He was in several different treatment centers in California. He was in Nevada, he was in Pennsylvania. So, and it was each place was very different, but it was so crazy to me that at the time we lived in Massachusetts and we couldn't even really find, a place for him to go that was close by to us. And, like you said, people didn't want those types of facilities or like to have places like that where we lived. And so for the most part, Justin would get on a plane and go out of state somewhere. So it was, it's crazy to me that we would have to do that.
Yeah, there are places, in the U.S. today, major cities that have very few treatment options, and even still, the treatment options that they have aren't always, I guess, robust enough to, to actually address, a lot of the local needs. Joseph, you've worked a lot with these treatment centers. Can you give us some ideas about, some of these? I guess we would call them treatment deserts, right? Where they're not rural; these are cities, but they don't have a lot of options. And why is that? And what ends up happening to the individuals in those cities who need help?
Yeah, I mean, like Ben touched on, there's a lot of that like not in my backyard kind of business, and a lot of it has to do with city management, but also like the cultures in different areas, and especially when it comes to a lot of treatment is for profit, right? Companies trying to do business in the business of helping people, right? And so what we'll see a lot is areas that are heavily Medicaid dependent, where you don't see a lot of commercial insurances, often don't have a lot of treatment options. You'll see kind of very often politics, right? More conservative states very often have less treatment options because we don't have those kind of problems, right? That sort of denial that we see in a lot of institutions and communities, like that just doesn't happen here. So what ends up happening though is, people have to travel far, far away to access quality care. And we have a ton of data, and Ben probably knows the specific numbers better than I do, but there's a ton of data that shows that like receiving care within your community leads to better outcomes, right? That being able to be close to your family so your family can participate in treatment and receive education increases outcomes. Being in a community where people look like you and have the same cultural experiences as you increases outcomes, right? Like I grew up in Laredo, Texas, right? 97% Hispanic, everybody's bilingual. And there were no treatment options in Laredo at the time. And frankly, there still aren't any real residential treatment options down there. So I got sober in Kerrville, Texas, where people pointed out to me for the first time that I had an accent, that I had no idea I had an accent. Where like nobody looked like me, and nobody had the same cultural experience as me. It was, there were some challenges to that. Luckily, I was able to overcome them, because there was a lot of other people from Laredo and from McAllen who ended up in treatment there because it was the closest option. But those treatment deserts are very real. And just like food deserts tend to break down along socioeconomic and ethnic racial lines. And it's an unfortunate part of the reality of healthcare in the United States right now.
Jason, did you, when you were looking at treatment centers and going to different treatment centers, was location and, was location a factor? Did it matter to you?
It didn't. I wasn't doing so hot, so I was just staying somewhere close just in case I had to leave. Because I went to treatment 19 times before going to Recovery Unplugged the one time, and I went to a lot of county-run, state-run facilities. So and those places, I know a lot of people that were that did really well in those places, and it just it was just I wasn't ready yet, and so I have nothing bad to say about those places, but it was free and it was close, and I was able to stumble over there to go to detox the 19 times, but it was really helpful, and I think it did probably in my case did a lot of harm reduction that it was so close.
So Mary Benway Gregg has a good question. And what are your thoughts on someone going back to the same treatment center multiple times? I'm gonna punt that to Mr. Karl Bremer. I think that he's going to be able to answer this masterfully.
Thank you, Mary. I'm an advocate of yes, send them back, because there's levers of what I call familiarity with the clinical staff. There's less of a ramp up period, less rapport building. I've had clients come back multiple times. And again, it's like, okay, I know you, and we've been working on this around your relapse prevention. Tell me what went wrong. And again, kind of building off previous thinking patterns around cognitive restructuring to, again, where did we drop the ball? Was it accountability? Was it area of sober homes? Were you not changing your playmates and playgrounds? Like, I believe it's easier to pick up where somebody left off, and by also going to the same treatment center multiple times. Because again, there's a level of, I think, less resistance when the client comes in of, I'm familiar with this program. I know how it works. And there's the hardest part when those clients do come back is they always expect that they're going to be shamed. But every time they come back, they find they're so welcome because they made it. And so that's the message I want to also promote of, like, yes, it's hard to walk back in there, but we're going to respect you for absolutely doing that. And we welcome you. The treatment team will discuss, like, hey, when have we maxed out benefits for this client on a level of, this is what we've offered. And I say, trust those treatment teams around, like, this is what we can still help this client. And they'll also come to the place too, I believe, of maybe let's consider a different type environment. And again, everything's case by case, but I see good results out of people coming back multiple times. So advocate, gosh.
So the two things I always tell families when they have that question: treatment is a journey and not a trip. It's not a one stop destination. It's not the Grand Canyon. Treatment is you're on a road that never ends, but it continues to get easier the further you go and the longer that you drive. And so, just continue the fight, continue to push. And thank you, Karl, for your input. That was very insightful. And the other thing is that, somebody had mentioned in the comments that there needs to be more treatment centers. I remember at some point, someone coming to me and asking, are there too many treatment centers out there? Ben, can you do me a favor and address the necessity and the need for more treatment centers, and are there enough treatment centers out there already, Ben?
So it's actually not as clean cut of an answer as we like things to be. So here's the data that we work with federally. 90 million Americans will use an illicit substance, but potentially fentanyl contaminated substance, one or more times by the end of December this year alone. Okay. SAMHSA's data says about 24 million of them have substance use disorder. So let's be super clear here. The vast majority of Americans who use drugs, they don't have drug addiction. They don't have it. They don't need to abstain. They don't need to go to my meetings or hear about my version of higher power or any of that. Right? But they need to de-risk that drug use. And then if we take the public and private funded treatment apparatus kind of writ large, let's be generous and say the field combined formally engages with about 3 million Americans a year. So at the tables that I'm at, like nobody is sitting around saying like, well, hey, let's fund treatment. Let's scale treatment up so they can touch the other 87 million Americans who are at risk. Like said no serious mind ever. And not one that got invited back to the table at least. Because that's not what we need, right? So do we need more treatment? Absolutely, we need more treatment, right? We need to make sure that treatment is extremely evidence-based, and we need different types of treatment. We need a revolution in how we fundamentally engage with and care for Americans who use drugs. The poison drug supply absolutely demands that we respond in effective evidence-based ways, which includes, right, varying how we operate within drug-using spaces or lives, because the risk has varied so much, right? I'll say this and I'll pass. I told a story on Facebook this week about a mom whose daughter was 7 months sober, and they were so excited for her. She was she said IV heroin owned my daughter, and she was 7 months sober after treatment. And they found her smoking pot month 7 in the garage, and they called the center and they're like, what do we need to do? And they said, she's absolutely relapsed. We wrote a relapse contract with you. You need to kick her out right now. Okay. And she died that night. Right? And I share it because it's the truth about what's happening. We're in a mass casualty. The data came out this week, 100,000, right, overdoses in the trailing 12 months. That's up 30%, in some areas 50%, right? And so we have to respond to this. And doing that with the beliefs that got us here, they're not going to work. So excited to talk more about that too, but I want to pass. I don't want to take up too much time.
Yeah. Karl.
Karl's chomping at the bit.
When I first started in this industry, over 15 years ago, co-occurring disorders was just not part of the regular words that you heard in treatment centers. And so mental health has really, really come alongside substance use. Again, for so long, I think there was, like, get them sober, get them sober, get them sober. And now the message has really shifted to, like, let's work on the wholeness of this person, emotional, physical, and spiritual. And yes, there is medical interventions that can help. But again, what we're finding, and again, what I see in my career is so many of us addicts were self-medicating all these underlying issues. I was sober for 2 years before I heard the word codependency. My sponsor goes, "You might want to look into this. Like, you're really codependent." I go, "I don't know what that is." And so that became a portal for me to begin to explore mental health. And I found out I'm like this much codependent and this much drug addict. And so as I begin to treat both of those in tandem, my life began to really change as a professional and as a person in recovery. Mental health is on the forefront right now. I love how Ben presented and pitched that what got us here doesn't keep us here. Again, mental health continues. This pandemic has taken mental health and shaken it up like a snow globe. And it feels like everybody has been touched in some way around mental health. We've been isolated, afraid, terrified, and we got to be able to get out and say, "I need help." I think Simone Biles opened the door for a lot of people to say, "I got mental health stuff. I want to help you."
Yeah, that was strong. So, Joseph, what you missed when Ben was on a few episodes in is that he said this phrase, one of many that has stuck with me, is 7 miles in, 7 miles out. And
Carl said that.
Carl
Yeah,
said,
Carl.
all right,
I was here.
all right,
I was here that day.
7 miles in, 7 miles out. And part of that is like, you know, what you also have to realize, like, and I've been ruminating on it, is that you take in a lot of shit with you, stuff with you that are going to help you survive for those 7 miles, right? And you know, and you got to come back out with stuff, right? You got to pack this stuff back out. You know, how you know, mental health and addressing the mental health is, I think, one of the first and best steps to, you know, to starting to put that stuff back together. But, you know, Joseph, when you started, you know, going through your journey in recovery, you know, how was mental health addressed?
I mean, you know, I'm grateful to every treatment center I ever went to, right? Whether it was state funded or private insurance or, you know, in the woods outside of Monterrey, Mexico, right? I learned something at every single one. I met amazing people. And it was all people who were striving for good, right? But I cannot recall mental health ever being discussed in any treatment center I went to. And I got sober 13 years ago. So I'm talking 2008. It still really wasn't a part of it. A lot of the treatment center I finally got sober at, you know, I mean, most of the therapists, while they were beautiful, amazing people, were very much 12-step, kind of like I'm like a sponsor, but I'm also a counselor, you know, and very 12-step focus, which was what I needed, right? Because but for the 80% of clients who come in that are dual diagnosis, you know, yes, they need someone to help them through the recovery work, whether that be whatever fellowship that they choose. But the dual diagnosis wasn't being addressed back then. And the only time that it was addressed was when my mother took me to go see a psychiatrist, right? Because, you know, it was like, okay, well, maybe he's not really a drug addict. Maybe he's just got mental health, right? It wasn't both. It was it could be either or at that time. I'm talking like 2004. And I went to a psychiatrist who, lovely man, he had actually known me my entire life because I went to school with his daughter. And I snowed him. Like, I walked out of his office with a prescription for Ambien, a prescription for Xanax, and some other pill, right? And I took some of them, and then I traded some of them to my drug dealer for some heroin. And I tell that story just to point out how up until very recently, you know, there was mental health and there was alcohol and drug treatment, and they did not mix at all. Much like now those two have come together, but we still see a big divide between, you know, medical doctors and substance abuse and mental health. And we really need to get all three of those things to come together in a really synergistic way to get ourselves to better recovery rates, to better education in communities, to better prevention, to all that stuff. I don't know if I answered the question, but
no, you did. And I'm gonna introduce a topic that I think is going to, at the very least, be interesting. At the very most, probably be controversial. But it is this. I've helped thousands of people get into treatment, and it's one of the things that I'm most proud of. But out of the many phone calls and many families that I've talked to, I've had a lot of people ask me, "Am I going to be around heroin addicts? Am I going to be around crackheads? Am I going to be around people who do, insert unsavory drug here? I'm just an alcoholic. I just use cocaine on weekends." That whole like Whitney Houston thing, like, right? Like, there is like this there's a level in or further down the funnel, there's even more divide in the people that are seeking treatment for their loved ones who are still stigmatizing addiction that is separate or different from what they understand as addiction. Lisa, when you were, looking for treatment centers for your son, and you were trying to, decipher out all of these, bad treatment centers, good treatment centers, what to do, what was it? Did you care, what sort of environment or what sort of, what the population of addicts were, or their ages or anything like that when you recall?
Honestly, when I first sent Justin to treatment, I knew absolutely nothing. And I assumed that he, obviously he was a heroin addict. And that particularly didn't even cross my mind. I was just happy that we could get him to treatment, and that he could, get help. But to be honest with you, that never, ever crossed my mind. Never even thought about it twice. I figured everybody who's there has their own reason for being there. And I was focusing on, Justin and, what he needed to go for. So no, that absolutely never even crossed my mind at all.
No, and that's great. And that's great. There's, that's just the testament that you realize that the addiction was the addiction, right? And
Right.
and then a greater exercise, that I think we'll all continue to get good at and continue to get better at if we're already good at it, is being able to separate the addiction from the person, and identifying that the addiction doesn't define the person as much as the person defines the addiction. Jason, what was your experience in being defined as an addict or having the label put on you as an addict, and how did that affect your recovery or your desire to be in recovery?
Well, I was in treatment, my last time when I ultimately got clean with a guy he was telling, the counselors and the techs that he didn't want me in his house because he was, I was a heroin addict and this and that. And then this guy's going to the gym and drinking the hand sanitizer in the bathroom. And then, he doesn't want me in the same house with him because I have a bigger issue than him. And, I can't be trusted. So, and it's just, you hear about these kind of things all the time. And it's just like, I learned, one of the things that I learned in 12 step is that you focus on the similarities and not the differences. And that's always been something that I've kept really close to my heart about that, because you never know what somebody's gone through. The pain is just the same.
Yeah. One of the I want to talk about the legal issues and the way that the Sacklers sort of navigated that, and obviously I don't think there's anybody in the comments or on the show or that's been a past guest that that doesn't believe or hope that the Sacklers face some sort of criminal time. I cannot think of any of I cannot think of any instance, right, where there has been an individual of lower socioeconomic stature that caused harm to an individual or a group of individuals who was not held fully accountable by the court system, for their parts in doing harm to that person or individuals. Ben, why is it that, so I guess let me back it up. We want justice, right? We want, my sister died in 2012, and I'm still angry about it, right? I'm still angry at the store that was selling bath salts because they were already illegal and they hadn't taken them off the shelves. I'm angry with myself because I didn't identify that she was having an addiction, and I'm angry with with the Sacklers because she had much like a lot of other individuals had gotten into a car accident and started taking oxys and eventually started doing what everybody in the show did. I want retribution. I want somebody to be held accountable. How can we and where is the intersection between my anger and the shared anger and justice, and where will we find that, and how do we find that?
That is a huge question that is way beyond my ability to answer in a confident way, but I'm going to try. So you said it. Look, we're human, right? And we want our emotions to play out around us, right? We want to derive meaning and have sense and order, and continuity between what we're feeling and what we're seeing and what we believe is actually happening. I don't know that actually happens very often, though. And look, I'm going to say it because I think we need to. I mean, the Sacklers deserve a lot of shit, and they committed horrible, crime, and they are, being held to account by the system that we all have, whether that is to my liking or not. I don't think ultimately is not going to change it. But the truth also is that it's extremely complicated. The epidemiology of how we got to the most fatal, overdose crisis in global history isn't just because a family sold some drugs. It's not, and I'm sorry, right? And I'm not trying to. I have friends whose kids broke a knee and were put on OxyContin and then had a later expression of opioid use disorder. I'm not going to try to take away from them the blame that that feels good to them right now. The research would take it away in many cases, but we're humans, right? And so look, I think for me, it's about really holding space for people to feel what they're feeling, right? And to validate people. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to want justice. It's okay to want more balanced systems. But also what I think is important for me is also to be able to try to contribute to how we can how can we keep this from happening again? And I just don't. I'm not a believer that punishment or that consequences necessarily foster the kind of change that we want it to. And I think that's reflected in people who use, the people who these great that you guys treat at Recovery Unplugged and elsewhere. If consequences and penalties worked on human beings, would we really even have patience anymore? Probably not. So yeah, just a huge question that you asked, and I'm gonna pass it along. I'd love to hear some other responses, but I think the real work is right in front of us in how we think about treatment, how we think about success in treatment, and how how we push back against the policies that are creating the super racist drug policies and drug law enforcement and all the cascading consequences on both sides of that today. So I'm going to stop right there.
No, and I thank you for it. And I'd also like to introduce Bando, who is our resident puppy in charge. You heard him just a little while ago, and he is one of the lovable members of the Recovery Unplugged addiction team.
I felt like he was rooting me on that.
Yeah,
one.
yeah, he's definitely. He was like, yeah, we need to get those guys.
Can I take a crack at the justice question real quick?
Yeah.
I'll be super brief. I have a friend who's like my friend that I like to argue the big questions with, right?
Yeah.
And inevitably to him, at the core of every issue or injustice is a question of race, right? And Ben just touched on some of the racial inequality we see within our healthcare system. But to me, even within the race issue is the money, is the greed issue. Unfortunately, very wealthy people have a separate justice system in our country. And if someone is waiting for the Sacklers to truly pay, you're going to be holding your breath for a long time, because it's not going to happen. They will have generational wealth long after all of us on this panel are gone, because of the way financial institutions protect their money, because of the way the tax laws, because of the way all that stuff, right? And I think that we can walk away from this show with one of two mindsets, right? Angry and frustrated that that's the reality, that there was this powerful family along with a bunch of executives who were not only complicit, but active participants in the death of hundreds of thousands of people and the destruction of families and property and all these other things, right? I don't think we can put a number on what the impact was, right? You can either walk away like really angry at that, right? Or you can walk away taking on like that personal mandate, that personal charge of, I see now how this impacted my community, even if I'm not an addict or no one in my family is. I see now that there's hope, right? We saw some people recover. We saw Dr. Phoenix driving people hours and hours away and buying a bus to take, stuff like that happens. There are people that do those things that have gone to those types of lengths to get people help. And so, you can kind of take one of those two things, right? You want to walk away angry and resentful, right? Or do you want to walk away from this show with some knowledge and some hope and go try to do the next right thing? Like, I think at least when I finished up watching the series yesterday, like that's where I sat reflecting afterwards.
Yeah. I think that's a crossroad, right? That's the fork. That is the intersection that we found ourselves at. And Karl, let's say we make the choice of hope, right? Let's say we choose hope, right? We choose, like, there's lots of things we can do, Karl, right? We can make sure that we participate in our local, state and local elections, community elections. We can find out who our community representatives are. We can find out who our aldermen are. We can go and we can petition, much like the way, I think that the show did a really good job of, identifying the weight and the importance of what a community can do when they pull together to try to accomplish something. Karl, if you were to, let's say that you had 50,000 people watching you right now, and you can get 50,000 people to do this one thing to help move this in the right direction, what would it be?
Tell the addict you love them. So often the addict feels alone, afraid to ask for help. And the first place you have to start is just love them. Now, love doesn't cure addiction. That's my disclaimer. But if you can get 50,000 people to love an addict, just for who they are, that could transition them to the next place of, I'm ready to get some help. Will you drive me? Because again, I think as the addicts that I know and love, and being one, that portal of love and safety and acceptance of it, that was the portal of change. And again, love them right where they're at and let them know that it can get better.
So since this stream began about an hour ago, around 8 or 9 people have died of a drug overdose. This is a trend that has continued almost without exception for over 30 years and has reached another pinnacle with over 100,000 Americans dying from overdose in 2021 so far. While we continue to increase the accountability for malignant actors like the Sackler family and the people who aided them, bankers, the justice system, we also have to recognize that addiction is everyone's problem and everyone's responsibility. If you have the ability to make a change or to affect change, do it. If you have a vote, use it. If you have a voice, use it. If you have a car, use it. If you have a bus, use it. We all can make a difference in a change during this pandemic and this epidemic. Among the dead and dopesick are our siblings, parents, partners, friends, colleagues, members of our community that we can all help and assist in playing a role in recovering and reversing this course. We're not so far off course with this that we can't get to a place where we can start moving in the right direction. It's never too far off course, but it's never too soon to start. If we just started today, if we just all started to make that decision that Karl mentioned, to go and assert ourselves the way that Ben mentioned, to have heavy and difficult conversations like the way that Joseph has with his friends, to be a willing and loving recipient of addiction treatment like the way that Jason is, or to love unconditionally just through the addiction and to fight no matter what, like Lisa does, we can move this in the right direction. Learn how to use Narcan. Check in with vulnerable loved ones. And don't be afraid to get involved if they're struggling. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know what to do next. Each and every person that you know has either been affected by addiction or know someone who's been affected by addiction. But you have more power than you think. Take the opportunity that you have with the knowledge that you have to extend that, to turn that into, I guess, a big hug for individuals that don't know what to do next. Because together we can make a difference. And I really appreciate everybody for tuning in and watching us through these episodes. But I want everyone to know that we're going to be continuing this after Dopesick, and we're going to be having a weekly roundtable talking about addiction. We realized that just talking about Dopesick was a great way to get a lot of people onto the right course and to hear things for the first time. We had people coming into treatment that had never thought about addiction or never thought about addiction treatment, but after watching us made the decision to get clean. There's no way that we're going to stop this, and we're going to keep this going until we know that this is what we're doing. And once it has stopped helping people is when we'll stop. So I say that to let everyone know that I will be providing a link in the comments so that everyone can, if you know someone that needs addiction treatment, we are going to be giving away a scholarship. In addition to that, we're going to be doing a limited lowered rate and discounted treatment for individuals seeking treatment this holiday season, because we're doing as much as we can. We can't give away treatment to everyone like the way that we wish that we could, but we are going to do our best. And we're also going to play a little bit of Lisa's story. I really don't have a whole lot more to say than don't lose faith. Don't lose hope, because it's only then that there's nothing else that you can do. Thank you. Stay tuned. We're about to play you guys something very special. Gabby, go ahead.
Justin had these amazing talents with music. We would go to my parents' house and my mother played the piano and Justin would just start, playing around with it. And we were amazed that he had kind of taught himself how to play the piano. And from there, he wanted a drum set. He was probably 10 years old. His friend had a little guitar and they started playing. And he and his friends put a group together and it was a talent show. Justin wanted me to make the costumes and gave me about a 1 day's notice to do so. And they dressed up as Kiss. Although he was embarrassed, everybody laughed at him, but he proudly went up there, did all the moves. I was so proud of him because that's where he shined. As he got older, people really started to notice. People wanted to play music with him. People wanted him to be in their band. Justin had a million friends. To this day, I still am so connected with so many of his friends because they were a big part of, my life too.
Lisa and her husband Ronnie's house has always been a hangout and a safe space for Justin and his friends. Ryan Brady and Alex Maluski still visit to catch up, share their music, and to reminisce.
He was the kid in school who, he would do something to make everybody laugh. And of course, he would get in trouble for it.
We were in like 6th grade. Justin had these 2 magnetic nose rings. Then all of a sudden they slid up and the outsides both fell off. And he went, ugh. What grade was that? We were like 11 or 12 or something. He was all gothy back then.
We always wished we could have Justin as our 3rd member of our band.
He loved music and he made me love it more.
Music was his passion. That was one place he could stand apart from other people. It made him feel wonderful, where he didn't for so many other things. He was just lacking in.
The Justin Enoch story premieres Thursday, December 2nd at 8 p.m., 7 Central, followed by a live panel discussion, right here at Recovery Unplugged.
My name is Lee.
All right. Thank you, guys. I appreciate each and every one of you. I appreciate Karl for taking the time out, Ben for taking the time out, Lisa. I am ever indebted to you taking the opportunity to spend this time and talk about such a difficult subject, especially with someone losing someone like that. Jason and Joseph, I know you guys are going to be back, and I'll be talking to you guys tomorrow. But everybody in the comments and everybody who's been on this journey with us, please know that we are going to continue this. We will be coming back, and we will have a link on our Facebook page to the scholarship application, as well as we'll also have the Recovery Unwrapped, where we're going to be giving away some lower cost treatment to some needy families and individuals.
Okay, can we also create a poll to come up with a name for this thing? Because we can't call it Dopesick panel discussion.
We can't call it Dopesick next. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Jason, I'm gonna punt that to you. Yeah, we'll create a poll the next time that we're here. Maybe we'll call it Hope Cure. I don't know. I'm terrible at these things. So yeah, I think we should do that.
No.
That was terrible.
I know. I'm really bad at that. I'm trying to think of like.
Oh, like Dopesick.
Yeah,
I got it.
Hope Cure. Yeah, I make myself laugh. That's terrible. All right, guys. Before we all go, I'd like to take just like we did last time, and Joseph, thank you for this. Just we're going to take 1 minute to do a moment of silence for the people that we all have lost to addiction. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Thank you, guys. Don't give up. And I'll see you guys next time.